I am 7.5 months pregnant and about to have my second home birth. And I want to tell you about my first home birth experience in hopes of maybe exciting you and inspiring you if it feels of interest to you and if you're curious to do the same. But before we get into it, please make sure to subscribe to my channel for more health and homesteading content. So let's dive in. For the record, I was born in a hospital. I had all the very typical growing up within just standard American food, standard American healthcare, and really didn't question any of it. And it wasn't until I got pregnant with my daughter 6 years ago, or I guess maybe 7 years ago, that I started questioning health and what I could do to better my health. It felt like there had come a point in my life where I was noticing how the conventional medical system was starting to fail, at least my family and I. I saw it happen with my mom, and this is actually the whole start of how I got into growing my own food, which I'll explain in another video. But to sum it all up, I started questioning things. And when I started questioning things, I started learning that there was like this whole underground world that looked completely different, complete different definitions of health and how to optimize health. And so when the opportunity came and I was pregnant and trying to decide, well, how do I want to go about this pregnancy? How do I want to go about this birth? I miraculously came across this book called Pushed. And I don't have the physical copy anymore because I gave it to somebody else to read the same. But it was that book that completely changed my perspective on the birthing process. I did have a bunch of other books and now have even more books that I want to share with you on natural pregnancy, birthing, and postpartum, and even parenting. Those will come in another video. But for now, let's talk about how this book really transpired the rest of my pregnancy and gave me the most beautiful birthing experience at home. I think the most compelling evidence that suggested I was safest to birth at home was because one, I had no pre-existing conditions, but two, I looked at the rates of C-sections and interventions in hospitals compared to home births. Well, the C-section rate in a standard American hospital is on average above 60%. Can you imagine what it is for home births? Less than 3%. That really opened my eyes to question, well, why? What is that about? And the book goes into great detail about why, along with some of the other books that we'll get into eventually. But there is something pretty evident here. And it seemed like the more interventions, the more anxiety, the more medications, all of this seemed to not only complicate pregnancy, but most importantly, then complicate labor. And so that was the very beginning of me opening up my eyes to the beauty of home birthing. And so I had to get my husband on board because he wasn't so sure of it. He hadn't known anyone or heard of the idea of home birthing, and it sounded really nerve-wracking to him. So I had him read the book. And once he read the book, he was in agreement. He was down to go forward with the home birthing experience. So the very first step was to find a midwife. And in the world of midwifery, there's many things to look for. And this is not a complete list, but some of those things can be how many births have they attended? How many complications have they had? How many deaths have they had? Unfortunately, there will always be some rate of death or complication. But like I mentioned in the very beginning, those rates are incomparable to what you see in the hospital. So what do you have to lose? Well, in a midwife situation, you obviously need to connect with the person, check their credentials, and make sure that you feel comfortable with them, that you're inner gut instinct, which, by the way, we have a nerve that goes directly from our gut to our brain. That's why they call it the gut feeling, because it's legitimate to meet someone and get a sense of whether or not that person is the right person to work with. That's the most important step. Sometimes a midwife will have a doula team and have all the recommendations for every resource you could possibly need. They may also be able to direct you to where you could also interview other doulas. So the difference between a midwife and the doula is the midwife is there with the medical and knowledge and experience to check you along the way throughout your pregnancy and make sure you are drinking enough water, that your blood pressure is normal, that your sugar levels are normal, and making sure she's identifying any potential risk factors that could call for some sort of medical transport to the hospital. And she's also there to handle any complications during labor or get you in the right state of mind and make sure that you have all of your needs set up to ensure a beautiful, easy, wonderful experience. The doula, on the other hand, is more of your emotional support. Sometimes the doula will come before the midwife comes when you're in labor, or while the midwife is working in some sort of way during your labor. For example, she has to gather some materials, or she needs an assistant. The doula becomes that person. You can also have a postpartum doula, which could be the same as your doula, or it could be someone different. It's just what you have to kind of gather in terms of information when you talk to these different people and different options. But a postpartum doula is there to make sure that you have everything you need, to give you food, to give you drinks, liquids, to wash your laundry, to make some tea, literally whatever your needs are for a week or two, so that way you can rest and heal your body. She's there for that. In my situation, I had a certified nurse midwife along with her assistant, and then I hired separately a doula. And a dear friend of mine who was certified as a doula flew down and helped as my postpartum doula. So I had my team. And what did that midwife care look like leading up to labor? Well, a lot of it was checking my glucose, checking my urine, which is a big deal because if you don't drink enough water, then you're not going to have as much amniotic fluid. It could lead to a whole bunch of complications. They're also checking my stress. Stress can lead to things like preeclampsia, along with not eating enough protein. And so there's a lot of things that can go into avoiding complications and health issues, all based on an emotional and physical basis at home leading up to labor. One of the most interesting facts I've learned throughout this process is how the more monitoring you have, the higher chances of a prolonged or stalled labor or other complications. And it makes perfect sense. Giving birth is almost a psychedelic, it's a spiritual experience. It is very much an outer body experience. And you basically have to be prepared to go into that experience with the awareness that any surrounding variables could affect your mental state. And the more relaxed you are, the more comfortable you are, the more confident you are. All of these things are going to change the way labor feels for you. And there's so much more I could share on this topic alone, but I really want to give you the birth story. So now let's talk about what it actually was like having a home birth. My due date was July 13th, and I went into labor on July 11th. So I was just a few days early, and my contractions may have started a few days prior to that, and I didn't really notice. I mean, maybe they were like even Braxton Hicks. Honestly, I can't even remember. But what did happen was my contractions started early in the morning on a pattern. So around 5 or 6 in the morning, I started feeling them. And at this point, I was very excited. And even the night before, I, if I had had babies before, I would have known that this was a sign that I was going into labor. But the night before, I got into this crazy mood where I had to make all sorts of lists. Like I was making lists for lists. Like lists were going up everywhere. And that is common to happen right before you go into labor is you get into like this nesting frenzy, which nesting already happens in the third trimester, or even throughout the whole pregnancy anyways. But right before it was like heavy duty nesting. So my contractions started between 5 and 6. They were basically like menstrual cramps. They didn't really feel like much. And I just went about my morning. Well, of course, as the afternoon and the day went on, the contractions started getting closer together, more intense. And by around 1 o'clock, we called for my doula to go ahead and come and assist. There are some things that I wish I had known differently from my first home birth experience to leading up to what I'm about to experience now. And I will talk about that more in detail. But some things that I didn't really understand, at least with that first home birth, as wonderful it was as it was the importance of submission to contractions and really envisioning them as your body opening up. And so embracing them with as much excitement and breathing and relaxation and loose lips and loose eyes to enhance and more quickly further the progress of those contractions. I think for me, no one had told me, and I hadn't read anything at the time, that the more tense I was during those contractions, the longer it would take. Well, from beginning to end, my labor was 14 hours. So pretty standard for a first time laboring mother. But I still didn't know with that particular home birth how much easier and even pleasurable it could have been. So, what I was doing that I will never do again was as soon as a contraction came on, I would count and hold my breath. I'd count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and that's the complete opposite. The complete opposite of what you should do during a contraction. What you should be doing, I hope, or hopefully, you can do whatever you want. But what you should be doing in order to encourage relaxation, and if you want potentially a pain-free and pleasurable birth, is to keep your eyes open, to focus on maybe your husband, perhaps, or someone else that you love, and breathe. Just breathe and feel it and envision your body opening up. So I went through these heavy duty contractions and I was in my bed and I was able to change positions and kind of do whatever I want. I was able to sort of dictate whether I wanted to be touched or not, or if I wanted the music changed. But I was in the comfort of my own home. I could go back and forth to my bathtub and just sit in a little hot water, which felt really good. And then my midwife came, and when she came, she said, "Oh, yeah, you are in the pushing phase. You are really close." And I felt the pressure to push. So they very quickly set up the tub in the other room and told me it was time to make my way over to the tub. And at that point, I was moving so slowly, and I wanted to push, and the contractions were just so intense. I was basically crawling on the floor and barely crawling at that. And my midwife joked with me and said, "Erica, if you want to have this baby in the tub, I think you're going to need to stand up." And with the help of my husband, that wasn't so bad. Throughout labor, one of my favorite positions was to wrap my arms around him and just fall. and just let the dead weight of my body just fall. And he was doing everything he could to try to hold me up as high as he could hold me. But that was quite a lot of weight on him. And so he helped me up. And as soon as I got into the bathtub, I opened my eyes and everybody was like, "Oh, hello, it's good to see you." And it was a good laughing moment. The reason why I wanted to have a baby in the tub was because one, I had come to learn that it can help prevent tearing, that it's very relaxing. And also, it seemed really convenient to have the baby in this like contained space where like amniotic fluid and blood and the placenta like could all come out and we could like suction it outside. It just seemed like the easiest cleanup option. But I can definitely say after having a baby in a tub that it felt amazing. Now, this is a very critical point in which my midwife was able to redirect my focus and my actions during the pushing stage. At first, I didn't know how to manage the pain. So I was yelling, basically, a pretty high-pitched yell. And my midwife suggested that I try to bring it all down into low grunting, low vibrational sounds. And so it went from like high pitch to very low pitch. And I was holding on to the little handlebar of the birth tub. I think at one point I was maybe gnawing on the handlebar of the birth tub. And my husband was sitting there in front, just feeling hopeless and watching, not really knowing what to experience or expect. But I was pushing. And it was during this moment where I pushed out the head, and the doula told my husband to come take a look. And what they saw was my little girl's head, eyes wide open, just looking up. And that was one of the harder parts. So after they told me that they saw the head, which there's more tips and tricks and things that you can learn from all of this that I'll share in another video, then it was much easier mentally to give one big final push and the rest of her body come out. And when she did, I immediately grabbed her. We looked at her, and my husband and I just basically sat there and looked at her for like 45 minutes. And we had talked about delaying the cord clamping. When you do a delayed cord clamping, that means that more blood flow is going into the baby, minimizing the chances of jaundice, giving them all the remaining nutrition that they can get from the placenta. And I honestly don't even remember what it was like delivering the placenta, because while that can come with contractions, it's certainly nothing like the baby. And there's so much oxytocin rushing through your body as you're looking at your sweet little baby that I have zero memory of the placenta coming out. I just remember it came out. And the midwife confirmed with me when I wanted to cut the cord, or my husband cut the cord. And so I was able to hold the cord and confirm that there was no blood going through it. It's completely translucent. It wasn't pulsing. And so we cut the cord. So after the cord was clamped, they asked when I was ready to move to the bedroom. Emery held Cecilia, and the midwives helped me get up out of the bath and into the bed. And I'd say an hour after she was born, we were in bed. I had a glass of whiskey next to me, and we were just relaxing in awe in the comfort of our room with our baby girl. And the midwife then did an assessment on her, an assessment on me. I really didn't tear much. She said that I had she would describe as an aesthetic tear. So she stitched up a little bit. And that was it. And the real beauty too of having this home birth was that we were already home, and the midwife came and checked on me daily for 7 days after that, checked on me, also checked on the baby, and then checked on me. I think it was like bi-weekly. There were a number of scheduled visits postpartum to check on me and the baby. And so they provided breastfeeding support. We used pad sickles, which are basically pads, wetted and frozen, to put all on that area to help with the swelling. And I was able to stay in bed for a week, not because of complications or because I had to, but because it was nice just to nest with my little girl. And, I think that there's a lot of information out there that says like you can just move around whenever you feel like it and like hop right back to it. But like the fact is, you just gave birth and have this huge open wound that your placenta was attached to inside. And so bleeding postpartum, of course, it's going to happen like within the next few days, but once it subsides, it's not normal to keep bleeding. I think a lot of times women are overactive and feel like they need to do things. And so then they disrupt what was like a scab internally, and then they bleed. So I personally had a wonderful time just being able to stay in bed for a week, go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, but just relax and sleep in my bed. And then after that, I slowly started moving around the house, started taking walks, and increased my activity from there. But the whole experience was just so beautiful and comfortable. Um, I couldn't have asked for anything more. And what's really exciting is since that home birth, both of us are obviously convinced that home birthing is the way for us that makes us feel most comfortable. And so now I have been preparing for this second home birth. And I've read a bunch of different books, many that I didn't read the first go around, that have changed my perspective and have me really excited about some different things that we're going to be doing for this home birth. And we'll be sharing all of that in another video. I think one of the joys of home birthing with my daughter Cece was that it was so relaxing for her. It was such a calm atmosphere for her. So instead of bright white lights, instead of people that she was unfamiliar with holding her, cleaning her, um, she was just held by me in warm lighting. It was around sunset. And then I think there was maybe a flashlight to check on me that the midwife used to check on me while I was giving birth once it got dark. But I really feel like this has a lot to do with her calm and relaxed spirit now. And so just the experience alone for her, I think, started the foundation for who she would become. And I'm really excited to share with y'all what I'll be changing and doing differently with this home birth, now having had one under my belt and one to come. I hope you enjoyed this birth story in this video, and if you did, please make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel for more health and homesteading content. I look forward to sharing the rest with you.